The price of gasoline pales in comparison to the idea of Ahmadinejad with nuclear weapons. Ahmadinejad having fissile material that he can give to Hezbollah and Hamas and that they can bring into Latin America and potentially bring across the border into the United States to let off dirty bombs here. I mean, or more sophisticated bombs here. We simply cannot allow Iran to have nuclear weaponry. And this president has a lot of failures. A host of areas have been troubling. But nothing, in my view, is as serious a failure as his failure to deal with Iran appropriately. This president should have put in place crippling sanctions against Iran. He did not. He decided to give Russia their #1 foreign policy objective, removal of our missile defense sites from Eastern Europe, and got nothing in return. He could have gotten crippling sanctions against Iran. He did not. When dissident voices took to the street in Iran to protest a stolen election there, instead of standing with them, he bowed to the election. This is a president who has made it clear through his administration and almost every communication we've had so far that he does not want Israel to take action, that he opposes military action. This is a president who should have instead communicated to Iran that we are prepared, that we are considering military options. They're not just on the table, they are in our hand. We must not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. If they do, the world changes, America will be at risk, and someday nuclear weaponry will be used. If I'm president, that will not happen. If we re-elect Barack Obama, it will happen.
So we see that Mitt Romney and the other neocons are complaining that Barack Obama has not prevented Iran from gaining more power and that he has refused to invade Iran or to attack Iran and to weaken Iran. And they're implying that the reason for this is Obama's connections, alleged connections to Islam. And so they're implying that he's secretly sympathizing with the Muslims or that he's secretly a Muslim. But we have a problem here because Mitt Romney himself is a neoconservative. And the neoconservatives not only did not invade Iran, and not only did they not weaken Iran, they actually strengthened Iran. George W. Bush, not only did he not invade Iran, not only did he not stop Iran's nuclear program, but he actually handed over Iraq and Afghanistan to Iran. He installed puppet governments in both Iraq and Afghanistan, which are totally loyal to the government of Iran. Even though before America invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, the governments of Iraq and Afghanistan were the enemies of Iran. Afghanistan was ruled by the Taliban, who were the enemies of Iran, and Iraq was ruled by Saddam, who was also an enemy of Iran. But now these neocons are coming and telling us that if you want to weaken Iran, you have to vote for us, because we're going to weaken Iran. But what is the difference between Obama's policy towards Iran and George W. Bush's policy towards Iran? Well, this is what Mitt Romney has to say.
This is a president who should have instead communicated to Iran that we are prepared, that we are considering military options. They're not just on the table, they are in our hand.
Mitt Romney is saying that Obama has to say that he wants to invade Iran, but instead he just says all options are on the table. Well, that's exactly what George Bush used to say all the time. George W. Bush, every time he was asked about Iran, he kept saying all options are on the table.
The National Security Advisor was making it abundantly clear that all options are on the table.
We will continue to tighten pressure when it comes to sanctions. I reserve all options. And my policy here is not going to be one of containment. My policy is prevention of Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. As I indicated yesterday in my speech, when I say all options are at the table, I mean it.
All options are on the table.
All options are at the table, I mean it.
This is, of course, President Obama's greatest failing from a foreign policy standpoint, which is he recognized the gravest threat that America and the world faced was a nuclear Iran. And he did not do what was necessary to get Iran to be dissuaded from their nuclear folly. As you know, there's some in the administration who argue that Iran's leaders are rational and that we can do business with them. As you know, there's some in the administration who argue that Iran's leaders are rational and that we can do business with them. The president speaks of common interests. Let me be very clear about this. We do not have common interests with a terrorist regime. Let me be very clear about this. We do not have common interests with a terrorist regime. If after all of the work we've done, there's nothing else we can do besides take military action, then of course you take military action. It is unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. This term unacceptable has been applied by several presidents over history, and our current president has made it very clear that he's not willing to do those things necessary to get Iran to be dissuaded from their nuclear folly. I will take a different course.
This deception has been used since the beginning of the Iranian Revolution of 1979, when the Democratic President Jimmy Carter betrayed the Shah and Khomeini became the leader of Iran. The Republican Ronald Reagan condemned him for it.
I did criticize the president because of our undercutting of what was a stalwart ally, the Shah of Iran. I did think that it was a blot on our record that we let him down. Have things gotten better? The Shah, whatever he might have done, was building low-cost housing, had taken land away from the mullahs and was distributing it to the peasants so they could be landowners, things of that kind. But we turned it over to a maniacal fanatic who has slaughtered thousands and thousands of people.
But when Reagan himself became president, he secretly armed and supported Khomeini while pretending to oppose him and calling him a fanatic.
This year, he said, the U.S. sent $12 million in weapons to Israel, which Israeli agents then sold to Iran for much higher prices, $10 to $30 million more. The Israelis paid the $12 million back to the U.S., but transferred the extra money to Swiss bank accounts. The Attorney General said later former National Security Advisor McFarlane had also been aware of the scheme. But Meese maintained involvement did not go any higher, that the President, Vice President Bush, Chief of Staff Reagan, Secretary of State Shultz, and CIA Director Casey all did not know of the plan. Meese did not explain how a Marine lieutenant colonel on his own could have arranged a deal involving 3 countries and millions of dollars, or why an admiral known for playing by the bureaucratic rules would not have told superiors.
You see, Reagan was helping Iran while he was pretending to support Saddam Hussein, while Saddam was at war with Iran. But because Reagan was lying and deceiving his own men, the plan actually backfired when some high-level officials were caught arming Iran. This happened because some lower-level government officials working for Reagan suspected that there was treason going on in the government. You see, they always thought that Iran was their enemy, so when they discovered that some officials were arming and helping Iran against Saddam, who was officially America's ally, they started investigating. But the investigations revealed that President Reagan himself was directly involved, and he was taken to court until he was forced to admit that this had actually really taken place. But he pretended that he himself didn't know anything about it.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. As the Tower Board reported, what began as a strategic opening to Iran deteriorated in its implementation into trading arms for hostages. This runs counter to my own beliefs, to administration policy, and to the original strategy we had in mind.
Make a mistake in sending arms to Tehran, sir?
No, and I'm not taking any more questions. In just a second, I'm going to ask Attorney General Meese to brief you on what we presently know of what he has found out.
Anyone else going to be let go, sir? If they'll
No one was let go. They chose to go.
What about Secretary Shultz? What about Secretary Shultz, sir?
I give you Attorney General.
What about how far is it that so much of this can go on and the president not know it? He is the president of the United States. Why doesn't he know?
Because somebody didn't tell him, that's why.
One of the politicians who was deeply involved in sending weapons to Iran was a young governor called Bill Clinton. Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., and Obama, literally every president of the United States since the 1970s has been involved in this conspiracy of helping Iran while pretending to be Iran's enemy. When Clinton became president, he even helped Iran produce the nuclear technology that the American politicians are now pretending to be worried about.
Look, one thing you can know, and that is if we re-elect Barack Obama, Iran will have a nuclear weapon. And if we elect Mitt Romney, if you elect me as the next president, they will not have a nuclear weapon.
You see, it makes no difference whether it is Obama who is the president or one of the neoconservatives, like Bush, Reagan, and Mitt Romney. They all pretend to be more anti-Iran than the previous president.
They've got to answer for the fact that Iran is the greatest strategic beneficiary of our invasion in Iraq. It made Iran stronger, George Bush's policies. They're going to have to explain why it is that Iran is able to fund Hezbollah and poses the greatest threat to America and Israel in the Middle East in a generation. That's the Bush-McCain record on protecting this country.
But when they are in office, they continue the same policy of helping Iran and just pretending that Iran is their main enemy. This is because they want the government of Iran to have credibility in the Muslim world. Since most Muslims are against America and Israel, the best way to fool Muslims to side with the Zionist Shias is to tell Muslims that the Shias are the biggest enemies of Zionism. But all American presidents have been secretly helping the fake Islamic government of Shia Iran that was created secretly by the Zionists in 1979. It doesn't matter who is elected because Iran is secretly run by the CIA and Mossad, and the Shia sect that ruled over Iran and now also Iraq was in fact originally created by a Jewish mystic called Abdullah ibn Saba. Shiism has always been a satanic Jewish secret society, and in order to cover up this fact, the Zionist-controlled media keep reporting that Israel and America are planning to invade Iran. But to this day, not only have they not invaded Iran, but they only invaded Iran's enemies and have been helping Iran, and Iran has been helping them every step of the way. So like all presidents, Obama also pretends to be Iran's enemy. So he says that Iran is a great threat.
Iran is a grave threat. Iran is a grave threat. Iran is a grave threat. It has an illicit nuclear program. It supports terrorism across the regions and militias in Iraq. It threatens Israel's existence. It denies the Holocaust.
But when he's asked about why he won't invade Iran, he responds by saying,
Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, these countries are tiny compared to the Soviet Union. They don't pose a serious threat to us. They don't pose a serious threat to us. Iran is a grave threat. Iran is a grave threat.
You see, American presidents have always been making contradictory excuses when it comes to Iran. But they're always helping Iran because Iran, like the United States, is secretly run by the Zionist Illuminati. So don't be fooled by these neoconservatives. They are not Christians, and neither is Iran a Muslim country. These neocons take part in pagan homosexual rituals at the Bohemian Grove. They and the Shia leaders are part of the same satanic secret societies. The neocons should not be confused with Christians, and the Shias should not be confused with Muslims. The last real conservative president of America was Richard Nixon, and even he was connected to the Bohemian Grove, and it was using Nixon that the Satanists managed to take over the Conservative Party, and from the very beginning they already had control over the Democrats. So afterwards the Satanists gained full control over the American government.
It made Iran stronger, George Bush's policies.
Now, this is actually true. The invasion of Iraq did make Iran stronger. And as I explained on Islamic City Forum, in the real reason why the USA invaded Iraq, this was actually intentional. Although the media don't like reporting it, Iran actually controlled southern Iraq with the permission of the USA. But wait, what is Obama going to do? He wants to pull out of Iraq at the same time that Iran's forces are in control of most of the country. Both the government and the Shia militias like the Mahdi army are controlled by Iran. So like Bush, Obama wants to help Iran gain more power in Iraq, as this is the best time for Iran to try and take over.
I have asked Vice President Bush to reconvene his task force on terrorism. I have asked Vice President Bush to reconvene his task force on terrorism. I have asked Vice President Bush to reconvene his task force on terrorism to review our terrorist policy in light of the events that have occurred.